Hey everybody, it's Carl here, and welcome to the final episode for the mini-series on environment art. And I should apologize before I begin. I have been away for a while, and that's completely my fault, so my apologies for that. But this video, like I said, is going to be the last one for this part of the mini-series because I am going to, well, when I find the time, actually, I'm going to go straight back to actually the whole point of my channel, which is actual level design. So we're going to be building some levels. Hopefully I'll be doing it in Unreal. I have to test my machine for that, but let's get on with what we're doing today. So today we're going to combine pretty much the concepts of the first two videos of this series into one sort of modular piece, I guess. I did say that I was going to make a whole building, but at this point in time, I just don't have the time to do that. I have a very busy schedule, at least for now anyway. So at certain points of the video, I'm going to speed things up. Actually, for a lot of the video, I'm going to speed things up. Feel free to slow things down if you want to see how I actually work through the pieces of geometry and how I build things. But I'll be explaining things as I go. So let's get right into it. Okay, so really, while I'm building this, I should probably explain the concept of pixels to units a little bit more. I forgot if I've actually mentioned that, but I'm pretty sure I have. Basically, the importance of pixel to unit ratio is that you decide very early on your pixel to unit ratio, right? So what I've decided here is 3 meters for every 512, which is the exact same stats for Uncharted 2. Surprisingly enough. So when you're actually creating environment art, make sure that you do have that pixel to unit ratio down. That's a very important concept. And really here I'm just making extra divisions. I'll explain that in a second, but please do keep in mind that when you're creating environment art, pixel to unit ratio is extremely important. It's a fundamental thing that a lot of I guess newbie artists, even myself, I tend to forget sometimes, and I sort of mess it up for this video, but hopefully it's not too noticeable. Hopefully. Okay, so pretty much now we've created the pieces that we're going to work with now. If you watch the video, and really that first bit didn't have me doing too much, all I did was make duplicates, because if I made a mistake while I was building these pieces of geometry, I'd pretty much have to make a new one altogether. So these two planes are just all reference pieces, I guess. And these are the actual pieces of geometry that I'll be working with. Now we can see that I've made the divisions in really all the areas. I'll explain why I have this wooden plank rotated and why I have these divisions in a sec. Or rather, I'll show you guys why that's happening in a second. This one, of course, it's just from the last video. All I did was pretty much what I did before, was I made the cuts and that's ready to extrude. This one, the brick wall, you can sort of play around with. You can sort of cut it up and sort of extrude some pieces that you want to extrude and have in-game do all the, you can bake in extra, what's it called, ambient occlusion, if you wanted, or you can have normal map do all the work, but it's all up to you, of course. From here on out, I'm going to start creating the actual piece of modular geometry that we'll use in a game engine for a game. So let's get to it. Really, all I'm doing here is pretty much working through all the pieces of geometry. With a cluster of other pieces out there, it's just a lot easier to work. Sometimes just hide all the other pieces that you don't need, really. Now, make sure that when you're making all these custom cuts, you do have preserve UVs on. Both Maya and Max, I think all Autodesk products have some sort of preserve. Actually, every 3D package should have some sort of preserve UVs function. Now here I'm setting material IDs. Actually, did I set material IDs? Well, the point is material IDs will become important at a later time, and I'll explain that when that comes up. Okay, so here pretty much all I'm doing is, well, I'm just creating the pieces of geometry, really. Now, you'll see here I'm going to start folding this piece of geometry up and actually mess around for a bit because I get confused. It's been a while since I've actually worked in environment art, to be honest. Nowadays, most of the jobs, I guess, that I do are either programming or initial level design. So I'm a bit rusty when it comes to environment textures. So please do forgive me for that. And all I'm doing here is just constantly creating new pieces. Just gotta keep going, really. Yeah, and I mess up, and obviously I want to do it properly. There's a lot of messing around now that I'm watching this back, but I eventually get it. Alright, so what do we have now? We have the extruded piece of geometry, which is the stone trims, which I watch it back and I actually spelled it wrong. And over in the corner you can see me setting the material IDs. That'll become very important when we start merging the pieces of geometry, because you can see from the two pieces of geometry, the two reference sheets that I've got, that each one is a separate material. So setting your material IDs is extremely important when you're merging two pieces of geometry that use two separate textures. It's very important, especially after unwrapping. Alright, so now I'm going to start unwrapping, and if you haven't watched the previous video, you should go watch it. I don't like repeating myself. I recently got into mentoring students as part of their course, and what I found is that repeating yourself just is not a very good use of your time, either as a teacher or as a mentor. So if you haven't watched the previous, I think it's previous 2 videos on environment art, please go back and watch that before you ask any questions, because if I haven't covered anything, then I really should have. And here I am just continuously making, I'm just unwrapping pieces, really. This wooden plank, or rather this wood board, it was a particularly nasty piece of work, because what I did was I folded it instead of actually making extrusions and things like that to the edges. What had actually happened is, when I started unwrapping it, they all came up as quads. If you pull the video back a little bit, you would have seen the projection plane, that little yellow circle. That's what 3ds Max thought the piece of geometry was, because what I forgot to do was I forgot to reset the X form before unwrapping. And so now really what I'm doing is fixing it. I'm not showing you guys the unwrapping process, because really, for those who just want to see how I work, this is how I work. Really, unwrapping is, it's a fundamental thing that every artist, whether they're working in character or environment art, should know how to do. I mean, it's a very important thing. The only time where you wouldn't need to know how to unwrap would be, I guess, if you're a programmer, I guess. That's pretty much the only time that I can think of where you wouldn't need to unwrap a 3D object. Either that, or maybe you're in the prototyping phase. Even then, for my studio, we'd still have a few basic block out characters that sometimes will actually make it into the game. Okay, so here I'm pointing out the material IDs and how they're important. And like I said earlier, the material IDs are separate for each texture. So if you look at the brick texture, that's on material ID 1. And for the texture atlas, that's material ID 2. And that becomes very important, because if they're sharing the same material ID and you have 2 separate objects that you're going to merge together, it's going to get confused. It's going to prioritize one ID over the other. Now, that was, oh man, when was the first time that I used Max? It's been a while since I used Max, but I've always been paranoid about mixing up my material ID, so I always make it a point. Yeah, I just made a mistake there. I always make it a point to set my material IDs just in case. Okay, so you saw the mistake. Make sure that you choose the right option. It's been a while actually since I've been creating not level design, environment art. A lot of the jobs that I've been doing now have mainly been programming and actual initial level design. So really, I'm a bit rusty when it comes to 3D at the moment. So here I'm just showing, right, what can you do with that one piece of modular geometry. You can do a lot. Heaps and heaps of what you can do. You can make derivatives, which is what I'm showing you guys now. I think I make a corner piece for this. No? Yes, I do make a corner piece. Yeah. Called it. And, yep, okay. When you're making derivatives, or when you're making, like, say, a wall piece or something, it's a good thing to ensure that you have the base piece ready, and that's done. And from the base piece, it's pretty easy to create, like, extra pieces, right? You can make corner pieces, you can make, like, sort of a bare minimum pieces, which I'll show you in a sec when I get to it. So, what are the advantages of having sort of multiple tiling textures? Well, the first thing is you can have this brick texture used on a completely separate object. So, say I have just a plain old brick wall, right? Nothing that attaches, not a brick wall that goes onto a building, but sort of those half walls that you see around. It's around parks and things like that. I could easily make a piece of geometry that surrounds that, that sort of uses this texture. And I wouldn't have to worry about having to use all these other textures, right? That's the thing about texture atlases, is that you really have to think about what you're going to be using the textures that are on the atlas for. So you can see that I've already made that mistake. I've gone ahead and made these wooden plank textures, and I was actually planning on creating a piece of geometry with these, but I didn't think I would have enough time. Turns out I do, but I really did not plan on using it for this video. Besides, it doesn't really look that great. So what's the downside to having two separate textures, right? There has to be a downside, and there is, and really the only thing that I can think of is that when you're running a game, especially on mobile, is that you're calling an extra draw call because of all the materials. So if you're making something for mobile, I would suggest creating a texture atlas for everything. So even if you are using tiling textures, you know, even if it's something like bricks or something like that, put onto a texture atlas. It's going to be a lot easier for you. That's really the only downside that I can see, because when we were making a mobile game, just as a fun little project, the biggest issue we had with the graphics was the extra draw calls from using separate materials. However, in PC, it can still be a problem, but it's not as bad as using, say, you know, for mobile. The problem isn't as big, but you still do have to watch out for how many materials you use. So either way, using tiling textures is going to save your life. It's going to save your time, and so you can focus on other things. And the cool thing is, when you get used to using tiling textures, you can create a whole bunch of really cool, awesome modular pieces, and it really does work to your advantage. Now, on to the next video. What am I going to be doing? First of all, this is the end of this mini-series. Next video, I really should focus on what my channel was made for, and that's level design. Hopefully, I'll be able to do it in Unreal. I'll probably have to buy some extra parts for that. I'll have to see, though. But yeah, next video is going to be completely level design focused stuff. No art for a while, at least, unless somebody asks for it. But hopefully this helped you out, and keep making some awesome levels out there, guys. See ya. Bye.